My name is Emma Collins. I am 34 years old, and 2 nights ago, at a grand celebration filled with champagne, crystal chandeliers, and money dripping from every surface, my parents called me the useless one again. Except this time they did it in front of 150 guests. I stood near the floral archway covered in white orchids imported from Colombia, holding a glass of cheap champagne that tasted like the bitter edges of humiliation. My father tapped his gold pen against a microphone, his voice booming with pride as he announced the real reason we were all gathered: to honor their only successful child, Nathan, my younger brother, the golden boy, the heir, the chosen one, a man who had never worked a full week in his entire life. The guests turned as a spotlight hit Nathan, smiling with that smug expression he used whenever he knew life would once again be handed to him on a silver platter. My parents smiled at him the way they never smiled at me, their eyes shining with adoration, ambition, ownership. Patricia and Richard Collins had spent decades polishing their perfect son into a shiny trophy to parade around. Meanwhile, their daughter, the one who stayed up late grading papers, who fought for children who couldn't speak for themselves, who donated her own paycheck to buy therapy tools for her students, was a stain they tried to scrub out of the family portrait. My mother raised a gloved hand, diamonds sparkling like they were mocking me. "We are delighted to present this to our son, who has proven he will take our family legacy to the next level." A waiter rolled out a velvet-lined box, and with exaggerated ceremony, my father opened it to reveal a set of keys. Not just any keys. Keys to a $10 million mansion in West Palm Beach. 6 bedrooms, a private dock, a glass elevator facing the ocean, a rooftop pool with an infinity edge. My brother gasped dramatically, placing a hand on his chest like a bad actor in a high school play. I stood there frozen, my heart dripping onto the marble floor like melted ice. A woman beside me whispered loud enough for me to hear. I thought she was part of the staff. Of course she would. I wore my nicest dress, a navy blue one from a clearance rack, while the other women sparkled in names I couldn't pronounce. My father kept talking, bragging about Nathan's bright future, his potential, his business acumen, even though that so-called potential was built entirely on lies, stolen ideas, and hand-fed opportunities. Then the moment that left a scar. My father said into the microphone, "Some people are born to lead, and some people, well, they just exist." He turned his eyes toward me. Everyone followed his gaze. I wanted to disappear into the floor. My chest tightened. My ears burned. My mother joined him on stage, smiling like a queen surveying a kingdom. She waved her hand dismissively toward me. "Emma has always helped others. How sweet, but leadership innovation that takes real talent." A few guests chuckled under their breath. Someone clinked a glass. Someone else snapped a picture. In their eyes, I was the charity case, the disappointment, the woman who failed to marry rich or climb a corporate ladder. They didn't know I spent every day fighting for children who couldn't fight for themselves. They didn't know one of my students had survived because I stepped in when no one else did. They didn't know because my parents never cared to ask. Nathan strutted toward me, still holding the keys, his cologne clouding the air. "Don't feel bad, sis," he said, just loud enough for people nearby to listen. "Not everyone gets to matter." That sentence cut deeper than any wound I'd ever endured. My mother approached me with a tight smile, the kind that hides a command. "Smile, Emma. Don't ruin the photos." I forced my lips to move, even though my soul felt like it was collapsing. But I didn't know the night wasn't done with me. Because right then, a man in a charcoal suit stepped out of the shadows, watching me like he had been waiting for the exact moment my heart finally broke. He raised his glass slightly, and for the first time that evening, I felt something other than humiliation. I felt the ground shifting beneath my parents' perfectly polished world. They had no idea that calling me useless would be the last victory they'd ever have over me. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, and stayed quiet enough, my parents would eventually see me, notice me, maybe even be proud of me for something, anything. But the truth is, they decided who I was long before I had a chance to become her. When I was 7, I brought home a drawing I made of our family. My teacher said it showed advanced understanding of perspective for a child my age. I ran into the house excited, waving it around like it was proof that I could shine too. My mother glanced at it for less than a second before pinning it to the refrigerator behind a grocery list and a coupon for laundry detergent. That same week, Nathan scribbled 2 stick figures and a dog, and she framed it called him Gifted, invited her friends to admire it like it belonged in a gallery. That was the first time I realized I lived in a house where love was not given equally. It only got worse as we grew older. Nathan got a brand new dirt bike for his 12th birthday. I got a calculator from a discount store along with a reminder not to expect more. You are a girl, Emma. Girls must be humble, responsible, supportive. Leave the big dreams to your brother. My father preached that message like it was a family scripture. If Nathan forgot his homework, he was overtired. If I forgot mine, I was careless. If he bragged about something he did, he was confident. If I did, I was attention-seeking. He was the future. I was the helper. Even when I excelled, they twisted it into something small. I graduated high school with honors. They didn't throw a party, they barely acknowledged it. The same year, Nathan got a participation award in a business camp for teenagers. They rented a banquet hall. They invited half the city. My family clapped for mediocrity if it came from their son. They silenced excellence when it came from their daughter. I remember overhearing my father talking to his business partner once. Emma is sweet, but she has no direction. Nathan is our legacy. The world will belong to him. It was always about legacy, money, power, the Collins name. And a daughter didn't fit their vision of what a successor should look like. When I chose to study special education, they said I was wasting my intelligence. When I explained how children with disabilities needed advocates, my mother rolled her eyes. You will never earn real money. You will always depend on us. That sentence became the chain they tried to wrap around my neck for years. Even after I moved out, even after I supported myself, they acted like I was a burden they carried. Then came the day Nathan flunked out of college because of drinking and parties. My parents paid the school to reinstate him. They blamed his girlfriend, his stress, his youth. If I had failed out, they would have blamed me. They would have said I lacked discipline, intelligence, purpose. They always found excuses for him and accusations for me. The differences between us were carved into the foundation of our lives. He was born to inherit. I was born to serve. And yet they still expected me to show up at every event, smile for every photo, praise Nathan for every privilege he received. Hope was a poison I kept drinking. Every birthday, every holiday dinner, every Mother's Day card I made by hand, I hoped this would be the moment. The moment they finally said, "We're proud of you, Emma." It never came. Instead, each year brought a new way for them to demonstrate how little they valued me. Being a daughter in the Collins family meant sacrificing yourself for a pat on the head that never arrived. Being a son meant being worshipped simply for existing. But angry as I am now back then, I still desperately wanted their love. That was the cruelest part. I gave everything for scraps of affection. And the night of the mansion announcement wasn't the beginning of my humiliation. It was the final chapter of a lifetime spent being told I was less. What my parents didn't realize was that while they were busy raising a king out of a clown, they were also shaping a woman who would one day refuse to be invisible. A woman who would learn that sometimes the strongest people are the ones nobody sees until the exact moment they rise. I became a special education teacher, not because it was lucrative or impressive, but because when I was 15, I volunteered at a community center and met a little boy named Liam. He had autism and would scream in fear whenever someone tried to speak to him. But when I placed a paintbrush in his hand, the world softened. He painted a crooked blue circle, then another, and then he laughed. It was the first time his mother had heard him laugh in months. That moment stayed with me like a tiny revolution happening inside my chest. I realized that helping someone find their voice was far more powerful than anything money could buy. So, while my parents begged me to study business to follow Nathan's predetermined path toward wealth and status, I applied for a teaching scholarship behind their backs. When they found out my father slammed his fist onto the dining table, his watch cracking a china plate that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Special Ed Emma. That is charity work, not a career. My mother just sighed dramatically as if she were suffering because of my choices. Why chase the impossible? Teach normal kids at least. You could marry well and never worry about bills again. But I didn't want to marry a wallet. I wanted purpose. I wanted to wake up every morning knowing I mattered to someone. They told me I was foolish. They told me I would regret it. They told me I was throwing away my future. Yet every day in my classroom proved how wrong they were. I taught 6-year-olds who couldn't speak to tell stories through colors. I taught children who had been labeled broken to recognize their strength even when the world refused to see it. I spent my own money on sensory toys, art supplies, weighted blankets. I skipped vacations so that my students never had to go without. I worked late nights planning individualized programs while Nathan spent his nights popping champagne bottles in private clubs. My salary was a joke to my family. $42,000 a year. They spent more on floral arrangements for one of their fundraisers. If I showed them a photo of a child smiling after finally mastering a motor skill, they would brush it aside. But if Nathan sent a picture of a new yacht, they would pass their phone around the table like it was the Holy Grail. I received 8 National Education Excellence Awards over the years. They remained tucked in a drawer because my parents never asked about them. I piloted a new art-based therapy program that was featured in a local newspaper. My mother refused to share the article because it made the family look pedestrian, she said. Meanwhile, Nathan once pretended to help homeless families for a charity gala and got his picture in a magazine. My mother bought 5 copies for her friends. At Christmas, I handmade gifts for everyone, framed photos of family memories, little pieces of love crafted with my own time. In return, I received generic perfume sets Nathan picked up at the airport, and my parents smiled like they had given me the world. Every time I showed up for family dinners, I played the part they assigned me, the quiet one, the supportive sister, the invisible daughter. Even when my heart ached for their approval, I swallowed it down and told myself love was worth the pain. I told myself they would eventually learn to value kindness, compassion, service. But they never did. Not until they realized those were the very things that would save them later. While they chased applause from strangers, I earned gratitude from children who couldn't speak but still found ways to say thank you. While they built a family image, I built futures, and still in their eyes I was nothing. They couldn't measure my success because they didn't understand it. They couldn't brag about me because I didn't bring them status. And that is why standing in that ballroom watching Nathan receive everything without lifting a finger hurt deeper than any comparison ever had, because the truth hit me like a punch. My parents would rather worship a son who contributed nothing than acknowledge a daughter who dedicated her entire life to helping others breathe easier. But what they failed to see was that I had been documenting everything, not for revenge, but so my students would someday know I fought for them. Those records would soon become the most powerful evidence in that ballroom. Evidence that the useless one was the only one who had ever built anything that truly mattered. The night of the celebration was supposed to honor Nathan's bright future in real estate, or at least that is what the engraved invitations promised. In reality, it was a coronation ceremony disguised as a family gathering. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers large enough to crush a car if they ever fell. Guests wore suits that cost more than my yearly rent and gowns so heavy with jewels they looked like they would tip over from their own arrogance. My parents loved these nights where their wealth could speak louder than their morality. My mother swept through the room in a gold sequined dress that clung to her ambition, kissing cheeks, laughing too loudly, making sure everyone saw her as the queen of a dynasty. I trailed a few steps behind, invisible as always, until she stopped short and turned to me with a tight smile stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. "You are standing too close, Emma. We do not want guests thinking you are working here." The sting of the words hit harder than the cold air blasting from the ceiling vents. I stepped back, clutching my small handbag like a shield. When my father banged his champagne glass earlier, I thought that humiliation was the peak of the night. I was wrong. After gifting Nathan the mansion, my mother beckoned me toward the stage. "Come stand with us," she said, through a frozen smile, her fingers digging into my arm like a warning. I climbed the steps, even though every cell in my body begged me to run. I stood a few feet behind them, deliberately placed in a position where cameras would barely catch me. Nathan raised his glass toward me with an exaggerated wink. "Emma is here, everyone," my father announced. "Our sweet girl who tries her best." Tries her best. as if I was a toddler who managed not to spill juice on myself. A ripple of polite laughter moved through the crowd like a disgusting wave. "Please, do not embarrass us tonight, dear," my mother whispered through clenched teeth, her smile never fading for the cameras. Nathan grabbed the microphone, his confidence dripping with entitlement. "My parents have been so generous to me throughout my entire life," he boasted, "and I promise to use this gift wisely to build a greater legacy for the Collins name." Then he turned toward me with a mock thoughtful expression. "Not everyone has what it takes to lead. Some people help in smaller ways." He gestured to the audience. "And we need those people too, right? Emma Tiny." Applause followed the kind you give when you are not sure if someone is joking or just cruel. My throat tightened until it felt like I could barely breathe. I tried to swallow my humiliation, but it clung to me like glue. Nathan leaned closer to me, his voice low, but loud enough for a nearby group of guests to hear. "Maybe once that school of yours finally closes, you can come work for me as a nanny or something. You are good with kids, after all." The guests laughed harder that time. The room tilted for a second. I gripped the podium to steady myself. A part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to vanish. Cameras flashed. The professional photographer hired to document Nathan's glory turned her lens on me, instead capturing the exact moment my heart split open. Then came the final blow. My mother tapped the microphone. "There is one more thing," she said with the tone of someone about to announce world peace. "Since Emma has chosen a simpler life, we think it is best that all future family assets be transferred solely to Nathan for his own protection and success." She pulled a document from her handbag. "We will just need a little signature from Emma tonight to make everything official." Cheers erupted. People actually clapped as if robbing me was some kind of charity. My father held out a fountain pen like a judge offering mercy before a death sentence. "Just sign here, dear. Do the right thing. The right thing for them." My hand trembled as I stared at the page. I was drowning in humiliation and betrayal so thick it felt like quicksand. That was when the man in the charcoal suit began moving toward the stage with purpose. His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time that night, someone looked at me not with pity or annoyance, but with recognition. The air shifted. Something was coming. Something that would finally turn the spotlight away from Nathan's fabricated greatness and toward the truth they had buried for far too long. Just as my fingers brushed the pen my father pushed toward me, the man in the charcoal suit stepped forward with a quiet authority that sliced through the noise like a blade. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who had seen too many lies unravel and had come prepared to pull every loose thread. His silver hair was neatly combed back, his posture immaculate, and his sharp eyes scanned the room with the precision of a judge about to deliver a verdict. "Excuse me," he said, his voice soft, but somehow louder than the orchestra that immediately faded into silence. My father stiffened as if he recognized the tone of someone who could not be ignored. The man stopped right beside me and offered a polite nod. "Miss Collins, may I have a moment of your time?" He said my name like it mattered, like he saw me. It startled me enough that I lowered the pen. My father stepped between us, his smile tight and dangerous. "I am afraid you are interrupting a private family matter." The man didn't flinch. "Actually, this concerns family matters more than you might realize." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a slim leather folder embossed with a gold seal. Then, turning slightly to make sure only I could hear, he whispered, "Do not sign anything tonight. Your grandfather knew who you are." My heartbeat faltered. My grandfather, he died 10 years ago. What did he have to do with this? My father's voice, suddenly louder than necessary, boomed with forced authority. "Who are you exactly?" The man turned toward the audience as if stepping onto a silent stage. "My name is Walter Hayes, attorney at law. Some of you may know the firm." A few nods rippled through the crowd. Hayes and Lockwood was a powerhouse in estate law. The type of firm old money trusted with secrets worth billions. My mother's complexion shifted from champagne flush to a ghostly white. Nathan blinked rapidly, gripping the mansion keys like they were slipping from his hands. Walter continued, I was the personal attorney of William Collins for 18 years. The room gasped. My grandfather's name carried weight even among the wealthy. A man remembered for integrity in an industry starved of it. My father's jaw tightened. We already handled my father's estate. There is nothing left to discuss. That is interesting, Walter said, because what I possess here suggests otherwise. He tapped the folder gently, the sound echoing through the ballroom like a countdown. My father looked like a man trying not to panic. My mother's breathing quickened shallow and shaky. Nathan frowned confused and annoyed that his celebration was no longer about him. Walter turned to me, lowering his voice again. Your grandfather left instructions, very specific instructions. He asked that I observe you, watch how your family treated you, and reveal certain truths only when the time was right. My throat tightened. Why me? What truth? His gaze softened. Because he believed in you, Miss Collins, more than anyone else ever has. My eyes stung. I blinked hard. This couldn't be happening. It felt like a dream cracking open. My father barked. Whatever this sideshow is, it ends now. Security. Two uniformed guards stepped closer, unsure whether to act. Walter raised a hand calmly. I would advise against interfering. The law is already watching this closely. A chill swept across the crowd. Phones remained pointed, recording every second. He handed me a small sealed envelope. The paper felt old, the ink pressed deep, like every word carried weight. Your grandfather wrote this for you, Walter said gently. He wanted you to have it when you needed it most. And tonight, Miss Collins, is that night. My hands trembled as I held the envelope. My name was written in familiar handwriting, shaky but full of love. The handwriting of the only person who ever believed I could be more than what my parents decided. A lump formed in my throat. My father lunged slightly as if to snatch it, but Walter stepped between us with surprising speed for a man his age. Not yet. All will be revealed. Soon. The crowd leaned closer, hungry for the unfolding drama, and I stood frozen, clutching a message from the grave, a message that felt like hope. For the first time in my life, I realized something monumental. I was not alone. My grandfather had never forgotten me, and everything my parents built on lies was about to burn. My father's patience snapped like a rope pulled too tight. Enough of this nonsense, he hissed, grabbing the pen from the podium and thrusting it back into my hand. Sign the waiver, Emma. Now! His voice was low-controlled yet laced with a fury he could no longer hide. The crowd watched with morbid fascination. Phones angled higher, fingers swiping to record. They had come for champagne and gossip, but were now witnessing a family empire cracking open. My mother slinked forward, placing her manicured hand on my shoulder as if she were comforting me, but the pressure of her nails digging into my skin told the truth. Do not make a scene, she whispered through her tightened smile. This is what is best for everyone. Best for everyone or best for Nathan? My lips trembled, but I didn't move. My mother's eyes flashed. You have chosen a small life, Emma. Accept it gracefully. Nathan laughed loud enough for the microphones to catch. Come on, sis, he taunted, lifting the keys to the mansion like a trophy. It is not like you were going to inherit anything anyway. You help disabled kids finger paint. You are not exactly CEO material. The laughter that followed hit me like stones. My father slammed his palm onto the podium. Sign it, Emma. Do not embarrass us any further. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. My fingers curled tight around the pen. I should have walked away. I should have screamed. I should have torn that paper to shreds. But years of conditioning had sculpted me into someone who obeyed, someone who apologized for taking up space. I stared down at the document. Voluntary waiver of heirship. The language was sharp like knives. Signing meant I would legally give up every claim to my grandfather's estate, to the company, to everything my family owned. My mother leaned closer, her perfume suffocating. You never cared about money anyway, dear, so be a good girl and sign. There it was, the line they had used to cage me my whole life. Good girl, stay quiet. Do not want more. Be grateful for scraps. My hand began to move the pen, hovering inches from the paper. My breath shook. My throat burned. Nathan smirked like he had already won. Then Walter stepped forward again, voice sharp. Miss Collins has no obligation to sign anything without legal counsel present. My father snapped around. You have no authority here. Walter smiled, calm as steel. I do when the document you are forcing your daughter to sign would illegally strip her of rights granted to her in a will you failed to disclose. The room gasped, the murmur rising like thunder. Cameras zoomed in. Security guards froze, unsure of whose orders to follow. My mother's hand slipped from my shoulder. Her face drained of color. My father sputtered. There is no such will. Walter lifted a hand. We will address that shortly. For now, let the young woman decide without coercion. Coercion, my mother repeated, choking on the word as though incapable of seeing the truth. This is family. We are guiding her. Guiding or threatening, Walter asked. His voice carried clear and cold. One could argue that telling someone they are a disappointment, unless they surrender their rights under pressure in front of 150 witnesses, is the very definition of coercion. Whispers spread like wildfire. My father's mask slipped entirely. There was pure rage in his eyes now. He wanted control, and it was slipping out of his hands. He jabbed a finger toward me. If you do not sign this, you will regret it. There will be consequences. Something inside me cracked. Not a breaking. A release. Regret. Regret would be continuing to believe I was worthless. Regret would be letting them define me forever. My voice finally returned, shaking but real. What consequences could be worse than losing myself? My father's face contorted into something ugly. Walter stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on the podium near my own. You do not have to sign. Not tonight. Not ever. My hand dropped the pen. It clattered loudly onto the podium. That sound echoed like a gunshot, a declaration. The room held its breath. My father stared at me like I had committed an unforgivable sin, but I was no longer paralyzed. I was no longer the obedient girl they molded. I was a woman who finally refused to hand over what little of herself she had left, and for the first time in my life they were afraid of me. The silence that followed the clatter of that pen felt louder than any scream could have. My father's lips curled back as if he had discovered a beast where his obedient daughter once stood. My mother's hand flew to her pearls, clutching them like a lifeline. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence flickering like a candle near the end of its wick. Walter did not waste a second. He stepped directly between me and my parents, elevating his voice with the conviction of a man who had been preparing for this exact confrontation for years. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, thank you for your patience. I know this is an unexpected interruption to tonight's festivities. The room leaned forward as though they were one body drawn by gravity into the unfolding spectacle. I am here tonight because William Collins, the man whose name built this family's empire, left clear instructions regarding his grandchildren and his estate. My father scoffed. My father left everything to me. That was his final decision. Walter gave him a look almost pitying, a decision you ensured by filing a revised will. Patricia's eyes widened, panic flashing and vanishing within a heartbeat. Revision. The word slithered through the room like a curse. Security guards hovered, uncertain whether to step in or stay frozen. Several guests gasped quietly, their excitement blooming into outrage. Walter continued calm and resolute. A will was filed. A questionable one. Every sentence was a nail in my father's ego. But the original will, the one executed properly, notarized, backed by witness testimony and video, remains valid. And it is very different from what has been portrayed all these years. My father tried to speak again, but his voice cracked. That document was destroyed. Destroyed implies knowledge of its existence, Walter countered. My grandfather's name in that lawyer's steady tone felt like a shield forming around me. The lawyer pulled a thick document from his folder, its pages crisp despite a decade of secrecy. This, he said, is the real will. The room gasped as if a bomb had been detonated. phones lifted higher to capture every moment. Reporters who attended for social reasons now smelled scandal. My parents' reputations were collapsing under the weight of truth. Nathan's jaw clenched. "You are bluffing. This is just a show to ruin our night." Walter arched a brow as if amused. "I assure you, Mr. Collins, your grandfather was very deliberate. He wanted his true intentions revealed, and he predicted that certain individuals in this family would attempt to silence or diminish those intentions." My mother's face twisted into an ugly sneer. William was old and sentimental. He adored Emma far too much. He was not thinking clearly when he made decisions. Ah, yes, the desperation tactic arrived right on time. Walter nodded as though expecting this argument. Mental incompetence. That would be an interesting claim to make, considering William passed several cognitive evaluations in the final year of his life. We have medical records from 3 separate specialists attesting to his impeccable clarity of mind. Patricia froze lips parted in stunned silence. Walter angled himself toward me again. "Your grandfather spent years observing the treatment you received from those who should have valued you most. He knew that love without acknowledgement is neglect. He wanted justice." My heart trembled painfully at the idea that he saw what I suffered, that he cared. Walter lifted the will high enough for every camera lens to see. When the real will is enacted, the assets of this family, including properties, liquid accounts, business holdings, and intellectual property, will not default to Richard Collins nor to Nathan Collins. Instead, they are to be passed to the granddaughter who demonstrates true contribution to society. My breath caught. The granddaughter! The room was stunned into perfect silence. Walter turned toward me fully. "That granddaughter, Miss Collins, is you!" Gasps erupted like fireworks. Someone dropped their champagne flute crystal shattering across the marble floor like a dramatic punctuation mark. My father lunged forward as though he could physically shove the truth back into the envelope. "This is outrageous!" he shouted, voice cracking like glass. Walter remained unbothered. "No. What is outrageous is attempting to force your daughter to sign away rights you knew she had. That Mr. Collins is fraud." Sharp inhales filled the room. Every camera pointed now not at Nathan's keys or mansion photos, but at the crumbling facade of a powerful family. And for the first time in my life, I was not the disappointment. I was the center of gravity. Not invisible, but undeniable. Everything they had built on deceit was starting to collapse. And I had not even opened the envelope yet. For a moment, the world stood still. My father tried to recover the illusion of control. "This proves nothing," he snapped, voice trembling despite his attempt to keep it steady. Walter's eyes glinted with a confidence that suggested he had only shown us the tip of the iceberg. "Very well," he replied, his calmness more powerful than any shout. "Then let us reveal why William Collins made his decision." He placed the will onto the podium and reached into his briefcase for a new folder thick with documents, photographs, and something that pulsed with the weight of truth. My father took a step back. My mother's breath caught audibly. Nathan's cocky grin vanished like smoke. Walter opened the folder and spoke clearly so every witness could hear. William wanted his legacy to reflect impact, not reputation, not wealth, not empty potential, real service to others. He lifted a page as if it were sacred. Gracefully, he began to list what my parents had overlooked my entire life. 8 National Education Excellence Awards for improving developmental learning outcomes. My mother scoffed, but her voice lacked conviction. "Anyone can get a plaque." Walter ignored her. 3 consecutive Teacher of the Year honors at a Title I school. Development of a groundbreaking art therapy program now serving over 200 children with autism, selective mutism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, and trauma-related disorders. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A few guests who once judged me now stared with dawning respect. Walter continued more forceful now. When the school lost funding, Miss Collins personally spent $12,000 of her own savings to keep the program alive. She took night tutoring jobs and forfeited vacation time to make sure her students would not lose the only therapy that worked for them. Gasps, murmurs, and for the first time that night, applause. Soft, scattered, but real. My father shook his head violently. We did not know about any of that. Oh, about. Walter's stare was piercing. You did not ask. He raised another sheet. There are 293 letters from parents and guardians independently verified expressing gratitude for how Emma saved their children's futures. 4 letters describe life-saving impact. There was a sharp breath from someone in the back row. It was Mrs. Hughes, a parent from my school. Emma saved my daughter's life, she said, voice shaking. My daughter had stopped speaking entirely after an accident. She was lost. Doctors told us to accept it. But Emma refused to give up. She worked with her every day. Now my daughter sings. Sings. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Others stood. A man I recognized only vaguely raised his hand. My son's anxiety attacks kept him from school. Emma taught him to communicate his feelings through drawing. She changed our family. More voices joined him. One mother sobbed that her autistic child spoke his brother's name for the first time thanks to my program. A father declared that his teenage son no longer self-harmed after discovering watercolor art could express what he could not say. My chest ached with disbelief that they were here, that they chose this moment to stand for me. Walter then played a short video he had cued on a tablet, connecting it to the ballroom screens used earlier to show Nathan's slideshow of expensive vacations. This one showed children smiling, painting, laughing, communicating. One little boy held up a drawing looking straight into the camera saying, "Thank you, Miss Collins, for giving me a voice." The entire room went silent. No breath, no judgment. Just stunned, quiet awe. Walter let the moment sit before delivering the final blow. William Collins documented all of this. He tracked every achievement, every sacrifice, every child whose life was altered because Emma showed up when the world overlooked them. He turned to my parents with a controlled fury that made them shrink. He saw what you refused to see. He saw her worth. And that is why he named her the rightful heir. My parents looked around for support, but there was none. Their empire of denial had shattered. The spotlight that once shined only for Nathan now burned hot and undeniable on me. And in that moment, I finally understood the truth. I had spent my entire life believing I had to become someone else to be valued, but here I was valued most for being exactly who I was. All eyes shifted from me to Nathan like a spotlight snapping onto the true star of the disaster. He adjusted the collar of his designer suit as though the fabric itself was suffocating him. His earlier smirk had dissolved into a twitchy frown struggling to hold itself together. Walter let the silence marinate, knowing the next revelation did not need theatrics to detonate. While Miss Collins was changing lives, he began the contrast being drawn in real time. Mr. Nathan Collins was regrettably leaving his own trail of documentation. My father jumped in too quickly. Nathan is learning business. Mistakes happen. Walter nodded slowly. Yes, and sometimes those mistakes are called felonies. The collective gasp sounded like the room inhaled all at once and forgot how to release. Nathan scoffed, but his voice cracked. That is ridiculous! Walter removed a second folder, this one slimmer, but the contents inside were sharp as blades. In 2021, Nathan Collins was appointed treasurer for the Collins Family Outreach Program, a charity established publicly to support families with disabilities. He paused, letting the irony bloom. Over the next 12 months, $217,000 disappeared. My father barked lies. Walter raised a document with color-coded transaction logs. These funds were redirected into accounts owned by Nathan Collins and spent on luxury items. A Lamborghini Huracan, a 2-week luxury island rental in Tahiti, private casino events in Las Vegas. Nathan's face drained as evidence splashed onto the ballroom screens. Receipts, screenshots, his signature looming like a confession. Whispers now turned ugly. People who had once toasted to his success now recoiled as if they finally smelled the rot beneath the perfume. My mother's hand clutched Nathan's arm. Darling, you must explain this. Before he could invent a lie, Walter continued. There is also the internship credit you claimed to have at the Collins development firm. He clicked the tablet once more. A HR email popped up. Mr. Nathan Collins has never been employed nor contracted by this company. The room cracked open with murmurs. My father's voice broke into a raw shout. Enough! It was clear he was not defending Nathan anymore. He was defending himself. Walter did not flinch. There is more. He turned toward the screens one final time. A short security clip played. Nathan in a drunken stupor signing a falsified invoice that claimed the charity had purchased new therapy equipment for children with disabilities. The reality was spelled out in the captions. Equipment. None funds transferred $58,000 recipient. Casino Royale, Las Vegas. The clip ended and the silence that followed was suffocating. Nathan's lower lip quivered. That was not supposed to be public. His voice sounded small, very small. Walter's calm tone sharpened into verdict. William Collins knew pride could corrupt, so he evaluated each grandchild not by accolades but by character. And character, like truth, always reveals itself. My father grabbed the edge of the podium, knuckles white. That boy is still young. He can learn. He can change. He did not mean harm. Walter cut in. Harm is not measured by intent, but by impact. Emma sacrificed to protect children. Nathan stole from them. My mother finally broke. Tears clung to her lashes, but they were tears of fear, not remorse. What will happen now? She whispered. Walter's voice dropped into a tone that promised consequences. The legal team is already preparing formal charges. Fraud, embezzlement, misappropriation of charitable funds. These are not family issues. These are federal crimes. Guests who once photographed Nathan with admiration now filmed his collapse with hungry fascination. The fall of the golden boy and the rise of the daughter he stepped on. Nathan shook his head, eyes darting wildly like a cornered animal. Emma, help me. Please. For once, he needed the sister he never protected. My voice was steady, grounded by years of buried pain finally surfacing as truth. I cannot save you from who you chose to be. The spotlight that once crowned him as the family's pride now exposed him as their shame. Justice was waking up, and it was hungry. The ballroom no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like a courtroom, and every witness held a phone in hand, ready to live stream the verdict. Nathan's earlier panic shifted to anger as he lunged toward Walter. You ruined everything! The guards stepped forward, but Walter quietly lifted a hand, stopping them again with nothing more than poised authority. I ruined nothing, Mr. Collins. The truth did. My father finally snapped, shouting so loudly that champagne glasses trembled on nearby tables. This is defamation. We will sue for every penny your firm has. My mother clung to his arm, trembling. Richard, please, they are all watching. The cameras, the mayor's wife, board members, donors. Their kingdom was built on perception, and perception was crumbling in real time. Walter remained perfectly still, like a judge waiting for silence before delivering a final sentence. If you would like to pursue legal action, I recommend beginning with a defense strategy for the immediate charges already filed. He tapped on his tablet once more. A line of text appeared on the towering screen that only hours ago displayed Nathan's future mansion. Court order executed Collins Holdings and personal assets. Frozen effective immediately signed. Judge, Rebecca Martinez. The oxygen seemed to disappear from the room. My father stumbled back as if the words themselves punched him. That is impossible, he choked. The company board would have had to approve. Walter turned slightly and a tall woman rose from a nearby table. She wore a black dress hair in a sleek bun and an expression sharp enough to cut glass. I am the board, she said simply. Sarah Whitmore, acting chairwoman since this afternoon. Your removal was unanimous. My father swayed, stunned, the power he worshipped slipping like sand through his fingers. Walter's voice remained steady. The accounts used to purchase the mansion for Nathan were traced to estate funds classified under Emma Collins's rightful inheritance. The property transaction is frozen and will be reversed pending investigation. Nathan's precious keys clattered to the floor, the metallic ring echoing through the ballroom like karma laughing. My mother's voice cracked into a plea. Please. There has been a misunderstanding. We believed Walter raised his brows. You believed Emma would remain silent forever, that she would accept crumbs while you crowned Nathan king. He leaned closer. But kings must earn crowns. Nathan shook his head repeatedly, refusing reality. I am not going to jail. Do you know who we are? Walter did not even blink. Yes, and that is exactly why consequences are necessary. Several invitations to the event were extended specifically to individuals who could hold you accountable. He gestured gracefully toward the crowd. Stepping forward were two uniformed state investigators, a woman in a crisp nurse uniform from the Pediatric Therapy Center, and the superintendent of my school district, his eyes filled with disappointment rather than surprise. My father's bravado shattered. What do you want from us? Walter's gaze shifted to me silently, asking whether I would speak or let him. I stepped forward for the first time, taller than the fear I used to drown in. I want honesty. I want accountability. I want the truth to matter more than appearances. Murmurs of agreement filled the space where ridicule once lived. Walter resumed with unwavering authority. Until the full legal hearing, Richard, Patricia, and Nathan Collins are prohibited from accessing company accounts, withdrawing funds, liquidating assets, or transferring property. Their travel privileges are revoked. My mother nearly collapsed. No, no, that cannot be. Nathan pointed at me with desperation, turning to venom. This is her fault. You think she deserves anything. What has she ever done aside from scribbling with children? Walter's eyes turned icy. Scribbling with children saved those children's lives. Your privilege built nothing. His tone sharpened into a blade. William Collins did not leave behind a fortune to be hoarded by greed. He left it to multiply compassion. The power imbalance of a lifetime reversed in a single night. My father looked at me for once with no script, no superiority, only fear. Emma, please help us. The spotlight burned hotter, but for the first time I did not shrink from it. The world finally saw whose legacy deserved to survive, and this reckoning was only the beginning. As the reality of legal consequences sank in, the powerful Collins family stood powerless before the very people they once belittled. My father, whose voice once commanded boardrooms, now sounded like a frightened stranger. Emma, he said again, weaker this time, help us fix this. My mother's mascara had smudged into dark rivers down her cheeks. She clung to her pearls like prayer beads. We are your parents. We only wanted what was best for you. I almost laughed. Best for me, or best for your image? It was strange feeling pity and justice colliding inside me. For a brief moment I saw the terrified couple behind the cold parents who raised me, but feeling sorry for them had destroyed me once. I was not returning to that role. Walter looked at me with calm encouragement. The decision is yours, Miss Collins. Every camera lens locked onto my face, waiting. The girl who once hid in the back of photos now stood center stage. I took a steady breath. I do not want you in prison. Gasps. Hope flickered in my mother's eyes. But I want change, real change. The flicker died into dread. My voice did not tremble. You will not handle the company anymore. I will. The Collins legacy becomes a foundation, not a monument to wealth, but a force that serves families like the ones I work with every day. My father stared, disbelieving. A foundation that was not the future he envisioned, yet it was the only one available now, and the mansion Nathan received. He looked up sharply, fear returning. That house will not sit empty while children struggle for resources. It will become a residential therapy center, a place where kids with disabilities can live, learn, and thrive without being told they are burdens. Shock spread across the room like lightning. Turning a palace of privilege into a sanctuary of purpose was unthinkable to those who worshipped money. Nathan exploded. Over my dead body. This is my house. You cannot do that. I turned to him with the strength of every child who ever overcame a barrier. You stole from the very kids who need help most. Now you will help them rebuild what you took. Walter's approving nod told me I was not only lawful, but righteous. Nathan shook his head. I will not be anyone's caretaker. My grandfather's words returned to me echoed through Walter. True character is revealed when the world stops applauding. My eyes locked onto Nathan's. You will work at the foundation for 2 years, minimum wage, full-time, no shortcuts, no spotlight. If you walk away, if you treat this like a punishment instead of a responsibility, your inheritance is gone forever." Nathan's anger cracked into raw panic. "But I will lose everything you were so close to learning that everything you had was built on lies," I said quietly. "Now you have a chance to earn something real." My mother swallowed hard. "And us? What about us?" I faced her, swallowing years of craving her approval like a bitter stone. "You will come to family therapy every week for a year. No excuses. No pretending we are perfect. We are going to rebuild a family, or we will not have one at all." She nodded, tears falling freely. My father was last. He looked like a man watching the version of himself he admired crumble into dust. "And what do you want from me?" he whispered. I stepped closer. "Look at me." He did for the first time without dismissal. "You will stop being ashamed of the daughter who cares more about people than profits. Value compassion. Value humility. Value me." He closed his eyes as if those words pierced deeper than any legal blow. When he opened them again, remorse flickered there like the first light of dawn. Walter addressed the room one final time. "These conditions are lawful and aligned with William Collins's explicit wishes. If agreed upon, all parties may avoid prosecution, pending continued compliance." I held out the pen my parents once used to control me. Now it was my tool, my power. They each signed, not because they wanted to, but because they finally understood that the era of worshiping Nathan was over. The Collins empire had a new leader, and this leader believed strength was measured not by the height of one's tower, but by the number of hands lifted from the ground. 6 months is not enough time to erase a lifetime of wounds, but sometimes it is enough to prove that healing is possible. The mansion that once symbolized Nathan's privilege now radiated with children's laughter. Its marble floors felt the tiny wheels of mobility devices gliding across them. Bedrooms once meant for parties and influencers now held weighted blankets, sensory toys, watercolor sets, and hope. We renamed it the Collins Center for Courage, a place where every child who entered would know they were loved, not pitied. Parents who once sat in offices with doctors saying there's nothing more we can do now walked through our doors and heard, "We'll try together." Nathan arrived reluctantly at first. He wore resentment like a cloak. But kids do not care about your resume or your pride. They care that you show up. They care if you notice when they struggle to tie their shoes or when they paint a picture of the monster under their bed. One afternoon, a little boy with autism had a meltdown. He threw paint across the room, staining Nathan's shirt in chaotic streaks of color. Nathan expected to be scolded. Instead, the boy smiled up at him, chest heaving, and said, "The colors sound happy." Something broke open inside my brother that day. Not a collapse, a thaw. Now he always volunteers for messy days. He still drives the Honda Civic Walter helped him finance. He still punches the clock at minimum wage, but he does it with pride. My parents have not missed a single therapy session. At first, they came out of obligation, then confusion, then humility. They listened when I finally allowed myself to speak the truths I once swallowed. My father cried for the first time I can remember. Real tears, not the staged emotion he showed in front of investors. He apologized not with gifts, but with commitment. Every Wednesday, he reads to children at the center. Sometimes he stays longer than scheduled. My mother learned to sit with discomfort. She helps with art projects now, even though glitter terrifies her. A little girl hugged her once and left neon green handprints on her blouse. She refused to wash it. She framed it instead. A new symbol on the Collins family wall. The company's rebrand into a foundation made headlines across the country. Investors donated. School districts partnered with us. Politicians visited not for photo ops, but because they had watched the transformation unfold publicly and wanted to support something real. Walter remains on the board. Sometimes at events, I catch him standing quietly in the back. When I thank him, he always says the same thing. "Do not thank me. Thank William." He knew the truth long before the world caught up. And then there is me. I still teach at the same school, same classroom, same children who need a champion. Except now when funding falls short, I can fill in the gap without sacrificing my own rent. When a kid says I want to paint the way thunder sounds, I have the tools to let them try. At the foundation's grand opening, I found my grandfather's portrait in the hallway. Walter had placed it there under a plaque engraved with my grandfather's words. Some people measure success in dollars, others measure it in the lives they change. Choose wisely. I stood there for a long time, letting his belief in me soak through the years of doubt. My parents approached quietly. For once, they did not take up space like royalty. They stood beside me like equals. My father cleared his throat. "We almost lost you." My mother's voice wavered. "We forgot that compassion is a kind of genius." I took both their hands, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was finally honest. That night, I locked the center's front doors and stepped out into the cool air. I looked up at the mansion now, a home to courage, and realized something profound. Wealth is not measured by what you keep. It is measured by what you give away. My grandfather left me a fortune. I turned it into a future. If you have ever felt unseen or underestimated, remember this. The quiet ones are not weak. The quiet ones are not small. Sometimes the quiet ones become the strongest people in the room. Sometimes the quiet ones change the world.